Hello, it's 3 o'clock. It's Friday. Welcome to Together Unlocked, brought to you by Together 2012. I'm Jude Gosling. I'm an artist and artistic director of Together 2012. With me here in my East London studio is Julie Newman, artist and our chair. And in the West Midlands, East meets West, is Robin and Josh Surgener. We always start our Friday program with our feature Dressing Up to Go Out to Stay In, where we encourage you and do likewise ourselves to dress up for any occasion, real or fictional. So let's have some introductions from the West Midlands. Tell us what you're doing in terms of being dressed up to go out to stay in, and don't forget a bit of audio description.
So I am Josh Surgener. I'm 24. I've got mid-length, swept over blonde hair, and I am
Ginger.
current blonde. And we know, for old viewers, you know that we like to say we're very competitive. So I will fight you on this, Drew. It's blonde. It's not. I will stick to that forever. No, I'm swept over hair, and I'm currently wearing a navy British swimming hoodie. Go to training and a nice kind of chilly morning session.
Okay. Well, I'm almost the opposite. So I have dark black hair. No. I have very white grey hair.
It's the opposite of dark black hair.
Okay, truth now. I seriously, folks. This is Robin Surgener. I am business director at Together 2012, co-host of Together Unlocked, and I am 56 and do indeed have very white grey hair, sophisticated colouring, obviously. I had every intention of not looking quite so scruffy today, but then I thought that wouldn't be taking the spirit of dressing up to stay in, because in fact I am going out to play a gig. I'm wearing one of my own band t-shirts. Just show you this here. Angry Fish is the band. Black Thursday is an album that I brought out a couple of years ago, so you can check me out. And it's a black t-shirt, round neck t-shirt with a white logo, and the cover picture was in fact drawn by Colin Hambrook.
And what kind of gig are you going to go and play, Robin? What kind
it's going to be
be?
it's an acoustic gig actually. I play as a band, and sometimes I do. So tonight it's an acoustic gig with drummer with his box of things to hit.
That sounds great. And what about you, Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm the chair of Together 2012, and I'm going to Costa Rica.
And what are you going to do in Costa Rica? What are you wearing, and what do you look like?
I'm wearing a strange baseball cap, which I borrowed. I think it's silver. I've got dark rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a white t shirt with a picture of Costa Rica on the front of it. And I'm going to go and watch the birds.
Any particular kind of birds?
Well, get your bottle of Guinness ready because I'm going to see a toucan.
I almost get that, but not quite. But I think there is an advertising link in there somewhere. So I'm Jude Gosling. Along with Julie and Robin, I helped to set up Together 2012 as a community interest company in 2013. That followed the success of a festival we ran in the main host London 2012 borough of Newham, which is where we're now based. In 2013, we were asked by the people who took part in our festival to set up an organisation and continue to do festival type activities like screenings, performances, carnival art, street art, all sorts of other things, but also to do a year round outreach programme, which we now call our Clubs programme and is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. And I think a really big thank you for them today, and also to the Arts Council who've been funding our artistic programme. So, usually in more normal times, we run what we call our Clubs programme on a Monday to Friday mornings up at St Bart's Centre in East Ham, which we'd only just moved to in January. So, it was a little bit sad to say goodbye to them for some months to come. We run art clubs, music clubs, photography and filmmakers clubs, dance clubs, pop-up poetry clubs. So we have a really wide range of activities. But today I'm dressed up to go out to stay in to go and watch a Survivors Poetry event. So I'm in my late 50s. I've got short but much longer than it looks actually under its layer of brill cream, red hennaed hair. I've got black framed glasses, and I've got a white t shirt which has got a sort of very digitally blocky globe, but then it's got some nice white embroidery saying we can change the world. And Together 2012's slogan is Together We're Strong. Together we can change our world. And that's what we're really trying to do at the moment, make life a little bit more fun and a bit more interesting as we're all living in isolation. Julie and I in Canning Town in Newham, and Robin, Josh, and the rest of the Surgeoners up in the West Midlands. We've all got our own wheelchairs, so together we make up the virtual sofa. And on Wednesday, of course, we have the lovely Penny Pepper, our virtual writer in residence, who in fact was already our virtual writer in residence before lockdown, which is pretty good going. So, all this week, we've been talking about Mental Health Awareness Week and the theme of kindness. And I wanted to really begin to link that back more closely with our Join In From Home program, of which this is part. We've got lots of activities that you can join in from home on our website, together2012.org.uk. You can also see the address at the bottom of the page. One of the activities is poetry, but I thought we could just talk a little bit more about more national efforts and kind of efforts that have been going on really for decades to link mental health, poetry, survival, and a better sort of sense of well-being. I was looking it up online. Survivors Poetry has been going, I think, for at least 30 years as a national organisation. At the moment, it doesn't seem to have as much going on around the regions, but it has been meeting in London at the Poetry Cafe and running a performance with open mic and advertised poets once a month. I'm partly dressed up to go out to stay in because, of course, I can't get to the Poetry Cafe. Yet again, there's no Blue Badge parking in central London, and therefore it's not an event I could go to in real life, but I would love to go. So there you go. Julie, what else do you remember about Survivors Poetry?
I think they were really radical at the time because they seemed to embody everything that disabled activists who were getting together post the. Do you remember, Robin, the BBC charity events? My mind's gone blank.
Well, it was
Oh, the
after the
telethon.
the
Yeah.
ITV telethon was the big one with the real massive
Yeah.
protest, and then they did a kind of follow up one when they did Children in Need, kind of tried to take over Pebble Mill, which obviously was in Birmingham. It's no longer there at all anymore. It is now a massive super hospital.
So I think we're going back to the days of the original disability arts movement where people were really campaigning against charity. That's right, isn't it, Julie? And what we were talking about earlier in the week about the move towards identifying as survivors. Are you able to explain a bit more?
I was really just saying about how the survivors movement grew out of the need to move away from being defined by the diagnosis, if you like. Diagnosis of mental illness has been very, very negative for centuries, actually. But the International Diagnostic Manual has given a lot of us labels that are very difficult to deal with. And it means if you're going for a job, I can remember going for a crack job with Westminster in the early 90s, Westminster Council, and failing at the last minute because of my mental health history. Not because I was a wheelchair user, not because I was physically disabled. They would have loved that. But no, it was the stigma of mental illness. And unfortunately, it was just before the introduction of the Disability Discrimination Act. I think even today, so many years on, over 25 years on, I think there's a massive stigma associated. Although I think what's helped is that, significant people, either, um, sort of football players, football stars, royal people like the princes. I think they've been fantastic, absolutely fantastic in trying to break down that stigma, particularly for men. Um, but I think overall, it's still very difficult, and I think generally speaking, because psychiatric and mental health care went into the community, people don't really know what to do if they're not feeling terribly well emotionally or have long term mental health difficulties. And it's very difficult to set up your own local structure of support. Um, I know we were looking at this earlier, Ju, and we were saying how there's a talking therapy being advertised locally, but they keep office hours, and how very convenient for everybody who can fall into that. I think ultimately it has to come down to the Samaritans, and sometimes they're very, very efficient and good at signposting to other services.
So, bringing that back to the survivor art movement, are you able to explain how people identified as survivors and started expressing themselves and coming together through art?
Well, it sort of linked up with the disability arts and the disability art forums that were established really all over the country ultimately before they got closed down. I think artists felt strongly that as artists, we were the ones who knew how we could use our skills and our interests and our creativity best. And it's similar to any other part of disabled people's movement. We didn't want to be told what to do or how to do it by non disabled people. And I think particularly important were the survivors network. It's very difficult for survivors to support each other when they're in the middle, or we are in the middle of mental health crises. And I think the sharing of poetry was a very kind way of doing that. We could share our experiences without putting a number onto somebody else. We were able to write down how we felt, and that obviously satisfies the need for creativity within. And I think sometimes trying to talk about how we feel is extraordinarily difficult. Whereas to be able to use a medium like poetry, songwriting, I know songwriting featured very, very heavily in the early days of the disabled people's movement, um, and using pictorial representations as well. And I think some of the very best poets that we have within the survivors network are basically people who can also use visual expression as well as articulate words.
Yes, and I think Colin Hanbrook deserves a mention here. And I think for anybody who's not aware of the disability arts scene, Colin edits a publication also funded by the Arts Council called Disability Arts Online, or just known as DAO. And Colin's work is absolutely worth looking at. And of course, there's a very rich survivors art scene out there and some very interesting festivals, not just poetry now. In fact, I was trying to think, there's a wonderful festival that takes place every so often in the neighbouring borough of Tower Hamlets, which is actually led by a Together 2012 artist called Natalie Nat. And is it the Mad Fest, Julie? Yeah, I mean, I think Natalie's Mad Fest has been absolutely wonderful. And like so many of these things, done with very small amounts of money. And again, when funding has come along, it's been mostly lottery. So thank you again if you play the lottery. When you were talking about visuals, Julie, that brings us on to our first contribution from a viewer. Very good timing. So this is Pritesh Patel's painting of, and it's drawing my thoughts. So I should have to lean in here. Lean here, Julie. We can't see you. Lean, lean, lean. So this, yes, do lots of leaning. This is wonderful system. No, I don't know. So I'm trying to audio describe this for anybody who can't see it. It's an A4, well, it's a portrait shaped piece of white paper. It's got Pritesh's face drawn in at the bottom. and then it's got a huge bubble coming out with all sorts of different thoughts and drawings, which actually are very complicated and too many to describe. But I love the hearts, the green. Who else? This is hopeless, really, in a way, because at least three of us have got not got the best eyesight in the world, but the colours, the sort of left half of it is yellow, and the right half of the bubble is green. And I like the way that there's different things going on in different spaces. Do you have any comments on it from the West Midlands?
Well, I mean, it's a great picture, and I think that um, what's interesting is kind of at some point. So there is a, if you imagine it's in two halves, there's a full-on yellow half. I just got smaller, um, and uh, and then the other half is much more of a mix of colors and activities, and it's almost kind of, to me, is showing that like the yellow half is just ordinary living, and the other half seems to be a whole collection of activities that cross, that work across each other, maybe work together, work against each other, but are all in there with the hearts linking it all together, kind of, for me, saying that what Pritesh is saying is that actually this is all me and I love who I am.
Which is great. So we have a section on the website where you can watch recordings of the show, and there's a linked page called Together TV Highlights or Together Unlocked Highlights. The exact name escapes me for a second. So we'll put Pritesh's picture up there, and we will also put a full outtakes written description, which is slightly better than this, where we actually get it up on the screen and go over it with a magnifying glass, which I did do before the show started, but it was mostly to think what a wonderful picture. So I'm just going to hide that. And we have another pink painting that's been sent in, and this is from Mark Noble. So again, do a bit of leaning, guys, so we can actually see this screen. So this is a beautiful picture that is the kind of thing that I think, again, in terms of painting and mental health, is not only very therapeutic to paint, but incredibly calming to look at. It's got a fantastic kind of bluey green background. There's a boat in the foreground, which, if I had to guess, I would hazard is a rowing boat. You can see a full moon at the background in the background with lots and lots of stars on the sky. You can see the reflections of the moon on the water coming straight down to the boat. You can see the reflections of the boat on the water. It's just a really, really lovely painting. Did you have anything to add to that, Robin and Josh?
No, it kind of it just it just looks really, the reflections and everything. It's just
I do. I mean,
cool.
and I think it's the kind of picture, as you're saying, Jude, that you can look at, and you can, even though the detail, it is in some ways very simple, it's also really immersive. You can take yourself into the moonlight. You can take yourself into the sky. You can feel, to me, it like it's a cold water, but not necessarily an uninviting one.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful picture. So thank you, Mark, for that. And also thanks to Mark and indeed Act Up Newham and Pizer Malik, who've all sent in poetry for next week's poetry slot, which is usually on a Wednesday. And thank you to Dash in Shropshire, Disability Arts in Shropshire, who apparently passed on the contact. So we're very pleased to have it, and we'd love to see more pictures. If you're painting at home, drawing at home, writing poems, making videos, there's lots of activities on our Join In From Home page that involve making a film, taking photographs, or just record those things. But it doesn't have to be something from our Join In From Home program. As with Mark's contribution, you can just send it in anyway. So we'll really look forward to putting those up on the showcase pictures. So I'm just going to hide that one now and pop us back here. Julie, did you have more to say about the survivors movement? I'm just going to have a drink because I've got terrible hay fever at the moment.
I think when it all started, I was really excited about it because I hadn't ever had exposure to people who thought like I did. And I know that sounds so self-centered and so egocentric, but you know what it's like when you think, am I the only person in the world who thinks this is wrong? Or am I the only person in the world who doesn't like something? Or, that sense of isolation can be very, very, just, I was going to say disabling, but and I guess maybe that is the word. It's not a word I use lightly, but isolation is a terrible thing. And I, as I say, I think for me, when I found out about the survivors and started to read survivors' poetry and to meet other survivors and to have a chance to chat and socialize and to realize that I wasn't the only person in the world who thought like I did, then it helped to free me from all sorts of constraints that I hadn't even been aware of.
And I think the other thing that, well, one of the other things that I find is just that whole sense of community.
Yeah.
I mean, I would add to that. I mean, I think that the bonuses of any form of liberation art is that it does that bringing together of people with like experiences, but not necessarily like minds. And I think there's a really big difference. People, oh yeah, come together. We all think the same. No, we don't. We might have the same thoughts. We might have some of the similar experiences, but that liberation art and that sharing of that art allow, allows us to both, as we talked on Wednesday, externalize those feelings, uh, but for other people to feed on those feelings, to learn that they're not on their own in those feelings, for you to know, for people to come back to you and say, do you know what? Those 5 words, 30 words, that picture made a difference to me. And then that makes a difference to you. And that kind of, where we started this week talking about kindness, and even though some of the outcomes of art that people have created, whether it's survival poetry or disability arts or other liberation art, actually taking the time to put those out and having the confidence to share them is in itself a sense of kindness, and not about um promoting the self at all, because most of us are appalling at that.
And I think something else is just about being with other people who recognize that actually you're not a disabled person, you're an ordinary person. It's one of those kind of bizarre things where you come together with only other disabled people in order not to be disabled, because you're recognized as, the sort of fully rounded individual you are. Robin, your screen seems to be collapsing slightly. We have a black line at
Oh,
the top of your
yeah.
picture.
I must be the
I do
heat.
sympathise
It
because
wasn't.
yeah, it
I
wasn't
mean,
like that to start with,
no, it
no, and
wasn't. It's
it's just wilting in the heat.
yeah, yeah.
I've had to turn our screen round because we have a little black cat jumping on and off the monitor, and every time he does, it moves slightly. So if you see sort of very slight movements. On the other hand, we had a complete pitch invasion, didn't we, on
We did,
Wednesday,
yeah.
where I've got my cats in the studio, I've got Julie's cats in the office, and yeah, on Wednesday they just weren't in the office. They were streaking across the studio when we were live on air. I think if you're able to have pets, then 90% of the time that is really good for mental health. And I think everybody who's got pets in lockdown has really appreciated that. But there is a little bit of the time when actually it's very, very fraught.
I like that unpredictability. I was really tickled when I saw the wrong cat coming across the room towards me, because I never expected in 100 years that he would ever be able to break out of that room. I just want to go back to what you were saying about liberation art.
Yeah.
I think liberation art is one of the best activities in terms of politics that I can think of. If you think about liberation anything, it does pull people together and it gives them a common cause. And as you quite rightly say, recognizing individuality. And I don't mean politics with a capital P, and I don't mean politics with Labours and Conservatives and Lib Dems or Scottish Nationals or anybody like that. What I mean is to be politicise means to be able to get in touch with your right, or all of our rights, to have a decent life, to have access to education, to housing, to food, um, to opportunity, and part of that, I think, if anybody's interested, if you go to the UN website and look at the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, you'll find a whole list of things that we are entitled to by right. But they didn't come easily, they weren't given to us on a plate. The people who managed to get that convention passed through the UN were joining together from all over the world and having to iron out an awful lot of very, very difficult and uncomfortable truths. The whole thing about everybody's right to education without being put to one side was one of those argument areas. Um, and another one was a right to freedom of sexuality, to express our own sexuality. That one got left out because it was too contentious. But the bottom line is that we do have a convention which this country, regardless of any of the governments, has actually signed up to. And that gives us a blueprint for the rights that we have. And I think liberation politics, liberation art is absolutely critical in having brought us to that point.
Thank you for that, Julie. And I think it links back to what Robin was saying on Monday when we first started talking about the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week, which is be kind. And Robin said, well, the first person you've got to be kind to is you. And that, I think, that sense of people talk about pride. And I think whether that's in the context of being lesbian, gay, disabled, transgender, intersex, it's about saying I'm fine who I am. Who I am is perfectly normal. It's everybody is this unique combination of strengths and weaknesses. They vary every day, they might vary every hour, and they certainly vary through our lifetime. And all those things are normal. It's normal to be depressed, it's normal to be anxious. It's normal for many people to hear voices, and it's when we think we're not good enough because we embody those things that we have no pride. And I think when we're able to say, I have the same right to exist as everybody else, and beyond that, I have this whole other series of rights, once you can start loving yourself, taking pride in yourself, it's much easier to be kind to yourself. And I don't think you can be kind to yourself if you don't respect and value yourself. And that was another thing that I think when we were talking on Monday about the Mental Health Awareness Week pages and their research, they had really stressed, hadn't they, in terms of respect both for others and for yourself. Let's hear something from Josh as a young person, because I think at the moment, I personally think the stresses on young people and teenagers at the moment is probably greater than it is for any other group. We've said before, there's a huge number of young people, including Josh, doing all sorts of things to help during lockdown and the crisis. But we don't really see that in the media. It's not really acknowledged. I have a niece who's a frontline cardiac radiologist. Julie has a nephew who's still in his teens who's out on the street. Josh is doing all this online coaching and motivating young people. And at the same point, the future is completely uncertain. All that we know is that jobs are being cut, that schools look very, the schools news changes almost every minute. I just feel really sorry for children and young people, and particularly if you're disabled and you're facing a whole load of additional barriers. I mean, have you got some tips for survival, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of young people, I mean, lots and lots of my friends are nurses and doctors and teachers. That's kind of the primary three kind of jobs of a lot of my friends. So all of the nurses and doctors and things are all, kind of they can't shield, they can't stay at home, they have to go out and be exposed every day, in a hospital environment. And I do know some people that are kind of continuing with their normal jobs, but then some of them are, had been moved onto to COVID wards and things. In terms of kind of surviving in lockdown, um, I'm kind of fortunate that whilst I am doing a PhD, there's not a huge kind of time component, time pressure, outside of kind of the deadlines we set for ourselves. And obviously it's 3 years, but if that needs to get moved, it can do. But yeah, some of you that are doing kind of GCSEs and A levels, or university exams and things, it's a really difficult and uncertain time. And in terms of surviving, it's kind of what we've been talking about all week, really. It's just talking to somebody, somebody else that's in your situation. If you are kind of stuck, not knowing what's going to happen with your exams, there's probably 25 other people in your class that are in the same kind of situation. If you don't necessarily have a friend group to speak to, or someone you can reach out to, kind of like you mentioned on Wednesday, there's helplines, there's people around and services around, that will offer everything from advice and support to just someone to listen. Sometimes it is just good to kind of vent and just unload all of the things that are kind of playing around. And yeah, kind of if you need to, it's not weak to need that service. It if anything, it's so strength to have the kind of confidence to say that you need some help.
And I think that's a really, really important point, actually, that we can't stress enough, is actually it is okay to ask for help. There is no shame in it. And, unfortunately, even, being the umpteenth year of Mental Health Awareness Week, there is still such a sort of yes or no, polarized conception of madness and civilization. And I'm not meaning to take that from Californian philosophers, but it's people think, well, mental health, that's white coats and been taken away in a van, and that still gets joked about in pubs, and that kind of, to lots of people having to deal with that concept of seeing themselves that way, because that's what they've always been told to think mental health means. So if you are then suffering, if any individual is starting to move into a cycle of being less mentally well, then if they have, if their opinions of what it means to be mentally ill is that very negative combination of, as I say, white coats and ambulances, then they're going to get worse. They're not going to want to talk to anybody. They're going to, and be probably at more risk of actually ending up in a worse situation. And there's just one other group that kind of comes under the young people, but I think that at a time like this, we're probably having an awful time, is young carers. Not, young, I think I've done various bits of work with young carers, and their young caring role in itself generates its own mental frictions, internal mental frictions. So you then get put in a situation where you become a 24-hour-a-day young carer because you can't go out to school. So then the expectations on you are going to ramp and ramp and ramp. And I just think that if we could be thinking of any one group, those young carers who were probably the least, or some of the least likely to have their own voice, that would be a really good thought. And if you know a young carer, drop them a phone call, a text, a letter through the door.
And I think this is a really good time to point out that, as what happens with our clubs is, we say any disabled person who wants to is welcome to attend. Everything we do is free. And anybody who comes to support them on an unpaid basis can join in on an equal basis for free. And we do have an offer that is just for young people, mainly for disabled young people. It's listed in our Join In From Home program, which is one of the top links on our website. And that involves Facebook pages for young creatives, for young filmmakers. There's an Instagram group. But there's also a one-to-one support program to do arts awards that is restricted, but I'm taking the decision at this moment to open it up to young carers. So if you would like a one-to-one, a wholly online, individualized arts award, arts awards are nationally recognised qualifications on the qualifications framework. They start at an introductory level, or you can start at bronze, which is a level 1. We can offer all 5 arts awards, and indeed have just started enrolling people who've been watching this show, which is great. So I'm really pleased that the first people have started. But yes, as of this moment, if you are a young carer and you want to do an arts award, arts awards are great because they don't necessarily involve any writing at all. It's all about making art, developing your leadership skills, and documenting it, making sure you've got photos or videos, which we can do as part of that support. I'm going to move on now just to, apart from it, trying to ignore the cat that has just appeared, because on our schedule we are due to look at some songs that people have sent in.
Can I
Yeah.
just interrupt and ask you what the upper age limit for that is, Ju?
Oh, that's a very good point. The upper age limit is 25. 2 young disabled people have sent their work in, of whom I know the second one is very definitely under the age of 25. These are young people who are songwriting in their rooms. The songs are at quite an early stage. I'm delighted to have them shared with us. Friday, we often focus on music because once a month on the first Friday, we run in more usual times and open mic night, which anybody is welcome to attend. And we've seen some wonderful people on their career and still will. We celebrate Music Club because Robin will play us out with a song later. But in the meantime, let's start with this song from Ellen Goody. And thank you again, Ellen. Let's go. Sorry about this. It's so hot. My fingers are slipping on
The
the
past
computer.
and the future, they go together. I still remember my past, and I am proud of it. I have the keys. I opened the door to blue sky. The colours of the rainbow from the past. I still remember being back at school. The colours of the rainbow. It takes me into the future. All colours around me.
So thank you again, Ellen. And this is Arwa's song.
I remember old memories like the were yesterday. Sister in my wheelchair with the weight on my shoulders. And look, it was all the now. Living life that I want. Living the past in the past and the hurt. leaving it all behind. Taking the day round, laughing and shouting, heavy eggshell inside, worry at the picture. I'm not angry anymore. It was hard, but look at me now, living the life that I was. Leading the past in the past, the heart. I'm leaving it all behind. Leaving it all behind.
Well, that was lovely, Arwa. And indeed, Ellen. And I think that is just another example of how you can express yourself, whether it's through music, poetry, art. It is just so good for you. So we come now to our usual Friday section, something for the weekend, where we recommend things you can do online, dressed up or not, to go out, but staying in where you can stay home, stay creative, and stay well. Shall we start with the West Midlands?
Yeah, no worries. Actually, I took my turn at having a look this weekend actually because Josh has been very busy with his some research stuff and some swim stuff. So I've actually got 4 offerings for things to do over the bank holiday weekend. Uh, First one, I mean, we talked last week, and I don't know if you got the link of the launching ships, but we talked about the idea of virtual tourism, and I found a lovely link to called Love Durham, and Durham is a very old and very beautiful city, and it's there. They've created a virtual tour of many of the kind of historic and beautiful parts of Durham. Um, and particularly actually is although next week's going to get lovely and warm again, the weekend's looking a little bit less so. So if you fancy seeing some beautiful views, we have Love Durham. The website again, I will forward these to you, but it is www.thisisdurham.com, then / Love Durham. Second one for you people down in the smoke, as you said the other day, although it's not just for London. But Time Out magazine has a listing for things to do this in London this weekend. And actually, I flicked through quite a number of them, and the majority of them are free events, which is really really good. And obviously, yes, it says to do in London this weekend, but I guess that's where they're being streamed from. You can do them wherever you are. Again, it's the timeout pages, and I'll link those through. And then there are 2 more, which I think are both on tomorrow. So if you are interested, I'm going to send you these links straight after the show. One is actually on Eventbrite, and it is a breath meditation and beyond online workshop, which in these times of slightly cleaner air, but perhaps more anxiety, the idea of breathing and meditating and feeling good inside, and we've talked about this kindness and mental well-being. It's pretty hard to feel mentally well if you feel physically unwell as well. So if we can aid that just that little bit, if anyone has any kind of breathing issues or breathing to relieve stress, I think that could be really useful. And then the last one, as ever, is a music one. Many of us who are, well, actually, probably from the younger adults through, will be aware of the kind of influence of music, hip hop, and stuff out of Bristol over the last 30 plus years. Massive Attack and Tricky and Portishead, and then right forward to other, people still, many bands coming out of Bristol and Portishead making music. And it's called the Bristol Takeover Online. from Colston Hall. And I think that's on all day tomorrow, or maybe a bit longer over the weekend. But again, I'll put that link up because it looks really interesting, particularly if you're into kind of that genre of music.
Yeah, I think I've been, or we've been to Colston Hall indeed. I'll remind you later rather than having this very dull discussion for everybody else now. But I like the idea of virtual tourism. I think it is so sad that Visit Britain people are having to go, don't visit, and I think, some of the scenes that we've seen. So, yeah, if you're thinking about going out this weekend, even if you're not in the vulnerable categories or including over 70s, people with long term health conditions, you know, why not be a virtual tourist anyway? Why risk when we've got 10,000 new infections every day, taking one of those or indeed catching it, going somewhere where they've deliberately closed all the toilets? Are not going to be very happy to see you. There's some wonderful virtual sites out there. I mean, you've talked to us already about the flower show, and I believe you're going to talk to us some more now.
Yes, indeed. For those of you who have an interest, the BBC has been doing a virtual Chelsea this week and followed it up online. The Royal Horticultural Society, the RHS, has also joined in. So there's all manner of virtual Chelsea events on the internet. I just want to point out as well what you were saying about singing is very good for the lungs. I know that I was advised by my physios to sing loud.
Yeah,
But
I'd agree. It's just that not everyone else always agrees. It's not always good for them.
well, I don't know. I can think of worse things to listen to. Amici are having their 40th year anniversary, and they've got
That's an inclusive dance company,
it
isn't it?
is. They've got some YouTube channels which they're showing live performances from the Lyric Theatre in Hammersmith, and there's one tonight, I think, at about 7:45. Picking up the virtual tourism thing, what I was going to say earlier on, and didn't have a chance to say, was that when I looked for Costa Rica, I was really interested in what Costa Rica was like because of the biodiversity. But I realized that it had masses of creatures. There's over 900 species of birds because they come up from South America and North America. And I strongly advise going online and looking at some of the Costa Rican virtual websites, the tourism websites, because it's a lovely place. And certainly I would love to go there one day if it was ever possible. But in the meantime, I'm thoroughly enjoying it virtually.
And I think another nice thing about virtual tourism is there's no pressure. We've talked about what, not to feel pressure to be creative, but, you don't always want to sort of read a book, do a virtual exercise, join in, do a painting, do a poem, write a song. No, let's just sit back and chill and have a look around somebody else's lovely city with a nice cold drink without having to leave the house. I mean, it sounds good to me.
Well, in fact, EJ, I went into EJ was in school this morning, but she kind of likes to have, she doesn't like silence. Um, and she'd got on, I think it was a YouTube channel. I should find out. And it was just it was like a cartoon of a girl sat by a window, appearing to write in a diary. It's kind of very simple animation, but with some really lovely kind of calming music playing, and a view out of the window. And apparently, there's a night view of the same from the same window that you can watch as well. And it's just like it's just really cool. I just sat there watching it, and it was really good because she even turned the page of the book, and I was watching it to see if it was just a repeat of the same apparent lines being written, but no, they were different length lines as well. So it was cool.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. And I mean, it's so relaxing and so good for your mental health because there is literally no pressure whatsoever. We're beginning to come to the end of this show. Not quite. We've got another 10 minutes before the ident has to ring off. So, a couple of news items. We're all staring at clocks over in West Midlands. I'm just noticing you.
No, I was looking at I couldn't see the schedule.
Okay, well, we'll be finishing with you playing us into the bank holiday weekend. But I just wanted to remind people we don't do shows on bank holidays, so we are not back on Monday at 3 o'clock. We're back on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. I think that's Wednesday, the 27th. Our second bit of news is that from the following week, I'm pleased to say we will finally have live captions. Thanks to the very wonderful Julia and Norma. We've been practicing this week, and the way it will work is if you watch our show on the website www.together2012.org.uk and you go to Together TV, you will see a box underneath with live captions. It's what's called Palantype, if you're used to seeing that in a show. So it may not be entirely accurate because it is literally live. We always put up a recording of this show by about 7 o'clock of the day of the live stream. And those recordings will then have edited subtitles where the wonderful Julia and Norma will have done another couple of hours' work, tidied it all up and loaded it on to the YouTube captions. Newham has got double the number of people who are deaf and hard of hearing that we have through the rest of the UK. I'm so sorry it's taken us this long. Thank you to the lottery for allowing us to use an underspend on it and keep everything crossed for the funders we've applied to continue to pay for it. So those are two bits of news that I'm really pleased about. So we'll be back next week with talking all things poetry. We'll have Penny Pepper, our virtual writer in residence, and of course, all of us.
Absolutely. I'd really like to thank our contributors this week. We've had some lovely contributions visually and sound, and I just think it's amazing that people are not only producing stuff during this very, very difficult time, but actually willing to share it. I think that's lovely, and I really appreciate their sharing their stuff with us.
Yeah, I so enjoy it every time we get contributions in, and it's just, I think because we could also easily feel very, very isolated because we're shielding. Doesn't Yes, well, we discussed whether it feels like shielding, but actually, there's a great big family of us out there, whether you're officially shielding or not. Everybody else is very welcome as well. But yeah, this is very much a place where we do not want you to feel alone. However, you may have got almost enough of us for 1 hour. So before we hand over to the boys, is there anything else you would like to say this week about the Mental Health Awareness Week theme, Julie?
I think a bank holiday weekend can be a very lonely time for people. And I think what Robin was saying earlier on was about, just if you know somebody, a carer, particularly a child carer, who might be isolated, feeling very abandoned, very alone, reach out, say hi, text them, phone them, email them. But the other thing is to try to remember that although it feels awful, it will pass, and time does help. But there's always somebody you can talk to. There are helplines out there. You can do it online, or you can phone free phone numbers. But please don't feel abandoned.
Yeah, and I'll put those numbers up again on our Together Unlocked highlights page. So there'll be all of the links on the highlights page to things we've mentioned today and the chat services and lines that we were talking about earlier in the week. I mean, I just think that's so important. I've been really pleased myself. If I get a text from somebody I haven't seen very often, somebody drops me an email, I think it genuinely is. People might have got a bit fed up about this message by now, but it very much is a time to reach out to people and to say, hey, I've got extra time. Usually I haven't got time to develop it book, but I certainly do now have time to reach out and speak to other people. I'm in touch with a couple of cousins I had no idea existed a few months ago. And yeah, that's been absolutely great. Would I have had as much time to talk to them? I don't think I would, because I would have been in taxis going backwards and forwards to the St Bart's Centre, and I'm able to use that time to do a bit of socialising. But I think I will leave it there so you're able to say a proper goodbye of your own and any final words that you've both got on Mental Health Awareness Week. And then we'll be having Friday night play out with Robin Angry Fish Surgeoner.
So I'll say goodbye and have a good weekend.
And I'll say goodbye and have a great weekend.
No, yeah, goodbye from me. Keep sending in all of your contributions. We're really enjoying seeing them. And I hope you all enjoy my Star Wars trousers. I back out to give Robin space to play you out.
In fairness, must say thanks to Josh, because actually he spent the whole of yesterday in bed being sick. So if you think he looks a little bit pale, don't worry, it wasn't COVIDification or whatever kind of word we want to use, but he just kind of came over a bit crook, as Alf Ramsey would say.
Yeah, and I think that's just one final be kind to yourself thing, isn't it? For all of us listening who are disabled people, yes, we do have bad days, and I had a bad day yesterday, and I just decided I was not going to do anything that I didn't have to, and that nothing was that important that it couldn't wait, and I think that was a really important thing to do. But now I really am going to hide myself and
Okay.
Julie and hand over to Angry Fish.
Okay, afternoon everybody. So this is Angry Fish Live. This is a song. It's going to be called it is called Institution Express, and actually it's one of the first songs that was written in a collaborative disability arts workshop way back in about 1999, I think. I'm on the railroad to freedom, 100 miles from everywhere. Conductor said next stop equality, but first you must pay the fare. They accept all types of credit, choices, rights and dignity, which means I have no way of paying, which makes this train hypocrisy. A voice announces on the tannoy, this train has been hijacked. Your social worker's smiling at you from the wrong side of a one-way track. What is the price of freedom? Does anybody out there know? Get rid of and regulations to make decisions on our own. Tear up the track that dictate where we're going. We're in charge from now on. It don't matter how difficult the journey, so long as it leads to freedom. Tear up the track that dictate where we're going. We're in charge from now on. It don't matter how difficult the journey, we're in charge from now on. We're in charge from now on. Thank you and have a great bank holiday weekend.